You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Moser. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Headlines today, 2nd of December. The campaign led by the British National Party's regional organiser Adam Walker over the sexualisation of children by the education establishment has been praised. A team called Parents Against Paedophiles brought to light the case of a head teacher. An illegal immigrant has been jailed for growing £190,000 worth of cannabis. Bystanders in Liverpool give the union leaders the notorious left-wing socialist TUC a hard time. Third dispatch from Nick Griffin in Brussels. Emergency meetings are taking place in Geneva at the moment to sort out the problems on the ongoing Syrian crisis. UK news. First of all, I'm sure all of us in the British National Party would join in wishing Richard Griffin and his partner Sarah congratulations in giving Nick and Jackie their first grandchild. Tyler Griffin weighed in at a healthy 7.5 pounds and is growing fast. Our best wishes on his first Christmas to his family and his grandparents. The campaign led by the British National Party's regional organiser Adam Walker over the sexualisation of children by the educational establishment in Britain has been praised by a research team. They have commended the British National Party for being the only political party to oppose the educational establishment over what the party calls a very dark and sinister agenda against the minds of our children. The research team called Parents Against Paedophiles brought to light the case of head teacher Nigel Leet, who was arrested and imprisoned for sexually abusing pupils at Hillside First School in Weston-super-Mare in North Somerset this summer. Their warning went out to all parents across the country in making aware the dangers of young children being taught sex education in primary and junior schools. Nigel Leet, aged 51, was found guilty of 22 counts of filming the sexual abuse he carried out on the children he taught in his class. One of the research team added, if a child is taught sex education in a primary or junior school, they would automatically think that it is normal practice when a paedophile is attacking them, especially if it is a teacher. British National Party regional organiser Adam Walker commented, "Our campaign caused a national storm," he explained. Parents are being subliminally brainwashed into believing that sex education is good for their children at that age. The research team head spokesperson said, why haven't decent British teachers refused to accommodate this sick practice? An illegal immigrant has been jailed for growing £190,000 worth of cannabis. Over 100 cannabis plants were found growing in 2 adjoining apartments in Weston. Lee Kwang Nguyen was paid £2,000 per month to grow the plants. He sent half of his illegal earnings back to his family in Vietnam. The man was 19 years old and admitted he had sneaked into Britain illegally. His defence tried to defend him by saying he only cultivated the cannabis, but the judge jailed him once again at the expense of the taxpayer. Nguyen got 18 months. The judge pointed out that he was almost certain to be drawn into criminal activity when legal work was not possible. Reports that a group of around 10 persons gave the union leaders of the notorious left-wing socialist TUC a hard time in Liverpool during the strike march in the city on Wednesday. The group of men praised the workers but shouted down TUC leaders who had been behind left-wing attacks on British National Party members who had campaigned in Liverpool with the Bring Our Boys Back Home campaign. The group shouted from the crowd, support the workers, not the unions, as they were applauded by some of the workers marching past. Euronews. This is the third dispatch from Nick Griffin from the belly of the beast in Brussels. The latest bank bailout plans are good news. The world's biggest banking institutions, the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Banks of England, Japan and Switzerland, are all piling in to print untold billions of dollars so that they can lend on the cheap to European banks, which are then supposed to lend them at a tidy profit to struggling businesses and families in the real world. How is this good? What's good about a scheme which buys the banksters a bit more time in which to rip off even more customers with their obscenely high interest rates? Only that it is the latest measure that is so desperate that it shows that the day isn't far off when the whole rotten system comes crashing down to the ground. And when that happens, we nationalists will get a once-in-a-lifetime chance to win the arguments and the power struggle to ensure that nations like Britain not only win back our political sovereignty from Europe, but also our financial sovereignty from the international banks. The financial experts and political elite all pretend that the financial crisis is very complicated. Why? Partly to justify their jobs and salaries, of course, but also in the very large part because the real story is so simple and so damning. The truth is that the global financial system is broken. It is beyond fixing. The world's economy is drowning in a tidal wave of worthless debt. Somewhere between $1 and $2 quadrillion. That's at least 1,000 times $1 trillion. It has been created out of thin air by all sorts of brilliant financial conjuring tricks. But since it is many times more than all the real wealth in the real world, it can never be repaid. It's the biggest pile of invisible junk in human history. Even the new plan to create a mountain of new dollars won't do more than buy a couple of weeks for the Eurozone to try to find a way to stop Italy and Spain following Greece into bankruptcy. All it will do is to stoke up the fires of inflation at the same time as brutal government cuts drive country after country into deep recession. Then, when it becomes clear that the unpayable debts are still not getting paid, and that government's abilities even to pay the interest is declining but day by day, there will be a chain reaction collapse of the world's phony financial assets. I came across some interesting facts in a press conference today hosted by outspoken Italian Northern League MEP Mario Borghesio. The main speaker was Daniel Estulin, a Russian-born investigative journalist who is one of the world's experts on the Bilderberg Club. This is a shadowy organisation that gathers the world's banking elite and their establishment political puppets together for a secretive behind-closed-doors meeting every year. His book, The Bilderberg Club, The Secret History of the Masters of the World, is an international bestseller and a real eye-opener. Eye-opening too is the fact that the newly appointed Premier of Italy, Mario Monti, is not just a former European Commissioner. Naive UKIP-type anti-Europeans who think that Greece and Italy are now under EU rule are missing the point. The unelected technocrats are not ruling on the behalf of the European Union, but of the banks. The real problem with Monti is not so much his Brussels connections. It's that he is a long-term member of both the Bilderberg Group and the Rockefeller-founded Trilateral Commission. And he and both of these deeply undemocratic and sinister organisations are up to their necks with Goldman Sachs, one of the banking giants whose insane greed created the financial crisis in the first place. This isn't about rule by all-seeing eyes or lizards in human form. It's simply a rule about interlocking cartel of global corporations. It's about money and power, and the desire of the global elite to tidy the world up, to do away with messy things like democracy and independent middle classes and nation states run by governments chosen by and answerable to their own people. The choice before us is simple too. Will we, the people, let these crooks and their mainstream puppets use their own debt crisis to impose their post-democratic dictatorships on us over the next few years? Or will we be dedicated and well organised enough to use the pain caused by our banksters' schemes and rip-offs to awaken millions of our fellow citizens to the possibility of a better way? The nationalist alternative, under which the power to issue the nation's credit is restored to its sovereign government. A sane, moral way of ordering our society so that banks and the power of money are there to serve the nation and her people instead of the other way around. It's time to decide and time to fight. World news. Emergency meetings are taking place in Geneva at the moment to sort out the problems of the ongoing Syrian crisis. The United Nations are reporting that Syria is on the brink of a full-scale civil war. The UN is also stating that human rights have been breached during the uprising against the Syrian government on the country's crackdown on protests. The human rights chief of the UN has said that 4,000 people have been killed since the start of the unrest in March this year. A British ambassador in Geneva has said that the human rights movement by the United Nations has been headed by members of the Arab states. The European Union has imposed sanctions on Syria's 3 oil companies in an attempt to damage the country financially. One spokesman said this is the European Union at its best, poking its nose in other countries' affairs that have nothing to do with Europe. A suicide bomber has detonated a bomb, killing him and 3 other people. Over 40 others were injured in the blast outside an American airbase in Kabul. The bomb blasted 7 government buildings, but reports have said that no damage has been done to the small American base. The results of the first part of the elections in Egypt have been delayed because of what have been reported to be very high turnout at the polls. The Islamists seem to have swept the board in the 70% turnout early this week. There were 2 demonstrations this week, one in Tahrir Square in the capital opposing the military and the other protest in a different part of the country. The Muslim Brotherhood, who were banned by the previous Egyptian President Mr Mubarak, seem to be dominating the results of this first round by getting at least 40% of the vote so far. And finally, reports from fire crews having embarrassing rescue situations are underway. Amongst the reports are one student who had fallen asleep to find herself stuck inside a clothes horse which was situated at the side of her bed when she accidentally fell into it and couldn't remove her head. Another incident included a man who was stuck in his son's toy car. The man sat helpless as fire officers found him in a car intended for a 5-year-old. As one British National Party scriptwriter commented, he was then arrested for being in a car without a driving licence. You have been listening to The World at 8. I'm Lynn Mozar, and I wish you all you nationalists a very safe and very happy weekend.
The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.